I'm pregnant with Simon's baby. The guy sitting in the main seat of the meeting room raised an eyebrow. $1 million for this? Giselle, director, is this a child's drawing? His face was 3 parts mocking, 4 parts scornful, and completely punchable. For your son, I replied. The room fell still like a graveyard. Just when I thought Simon would call off the deal and storm out, he surprised me. Wait, are you pregnant? He casually asked. I wanted to snap back, but he was right. I really was pregnant. I'm pregnant, and the father's Simon, a high school friend of mine. Looking at the report in my hand, I was stunned. No way, we hit bingo with one shot. Is Simon that potent? Thinking back to that night, well, it was pretty great. Lately, I've felt off, nauseous. I chalked it up to post-overtime exhaustion from the crazy design firm pace. Then my app reminded me I was 10 days late. That's when I realized my period was a no-show. It's usually a bit irregular, but this long? Never happened before. Before going to the hospital, I comforted myself. Maybe it was just a fluke, like winning a lottery, and unfortunately, this time I hit the jackpot. The doctor was a woman. Married? She asked. I shook my head. Any boyfriend? I shook it again. Probably just irregular periods, nothing to panic about, she said, typing away at the keyboard. I took a deep breath. Doctor, I've been active lately. As soon as I said it, the doctor's kind face crumpled a bit, and she paused. Outside the lab, I looked at the HCG report, way above normal. I touched my belly, replaying that night in my head, Googling alcohol's effect on a fetus. Yeah, Simon and I hooked up drunk after a high school reunion. Without that twist, we might never have crossed paths again. The internet said one-time drinking might not be a big deal, but some responses were downright alarming. As I was about to read more, it was my turn to see the doctor. You're pregnant, said the doctor behind the computer, adjusting her glasses. Her tone was resigned. I hesitated, then hesitantly brought up the little drinking matter. Doctor, with those circumstances, should I couldn't complete the sentence. I wouldn't advise termination, she said, adjusting her glasses again. Puzzled and worried, I gave her a questioning look. You young girls, it's not just a simple procedure. Look out for yourselves. She sighed heavily, noting the resignation in her voice. A woman's best care is for her uterus, don't abort lightly. Who knows if you can conceive again later? She said sternly. I could tell she was upset by my recklessness. Keep it for now, monitor regularly. Abort only if there are anomalies, the doctor advised, her words echoing in my mind. Returning home in a daze with the report, it took time to process. There's a life inside me. Why's it dark in here? You nearly gave me a heart attack. Shirley's sharp voice broke the silence as the living room lights came on. I turned to her, voice shaky. Shirley. What's wrong? Don't scare me like that. Shirley panicked, apologizing repeatedly, thinking she'd startled me. After I explained about the baby, she jumped up from the couch. Giselle, say that again? I guess her reaction mirrored mine earlier, completely floored by the news. I'm pregnant, I admitted, though my voice trembled even as I faced the reality. I'm totally unprepared for motherhood. The baby might even end up fatherless. You sure are something, popping out a kid just like that. Who's the dad? Shirley sipped her water, her tone softening a bit. Remember Simon? From our high school class, the rich guy who left for study abroad in junior year? The handsome one? Yeah, I remember him, Shirley quickly recalled the guy. Why mention him? Don't tell me he's the dad. Seeing shock replace confusion on her face, I nodded, slumping into the couch. I heard Shirley muttering under her breath, this world's insane. Too bizarre. It's not April Fool's. Then she found my test report in my bag, resignedly joining me on the couch. What now? I shook my head, clueless. I replayed the doctor's advice to Shirley. She knew me best past high school and I trust her implicitly. These days, some girls keep the kid and skip the guy. Simon has great genes. Why abandon them? She suddenly perked up. As if a light bulb went off, I found myself entertaining the idea. Having a beautiful baby without the hassle of a man sounds, all right. I'm thinking of keeping the baby. If Simon's family finds out, you might marry into wealth, Shirley teased, eyeing my belly. Marrying rich isn't easy. Even starlets have had kids for rich families without making it. I dismissed her, never considering leveraging the baby. Honestly, I don't want Simon to know this baby exists. If he fights for custody, I become a mere womb. What a mess. Anyway, I doubt he even recalls my name. We don't have each other's numbers or any connection. After making this decision, I felt relief and even a bit of excitement for this baby. I took 2 days off, researching child rearing at home. My takeaway: kids are pricey. On my second off afternoon, Charles called, meeting me at the office. Charles, my college buddy and business partner, sounded urgent. We co-founded our design firm post-graduation, originally just us, with him on business and me design. A couple of years back, we rented an office, hired some staff, and became a small startup. I'm not coming back to work till Monday. Glancing at my fresh nails, I thought about removing them. It's urgent, and the partner wants to sign today. No one else can close it, Charles said, clearly stressed. They agreed. The news jolted me from the couch, only to remember my belly. Sorry, baby, mommy got rough, but this job pays well. Gotta earn for you. Not fully. They want to see your initial designs. $1 million fee, they aren't fools. Isn't the leader your high school friend? The only reason we got in with Group Y this time is because one of Charles's old high school friends is a manager in their design department. Their boss even came over this time. I heard Charles let out a sigh. The boss? Probably the design department director. I thought about it, maybe our company can't handle it. Later, I realized I underestimated the situation. Charles was talking about the head of R&D, who is also Group Y's VP. No wonder Charles, usually so sociable, seemed nervous that day. I grabbed my bag and dashed out the door, ordering a ride while waiting for the elevator since Shirley had taken my car that morning. Traffic seemed worse than usual, with an accident slowing things down. By the time I got to the office, the Group Y team was already there. I went up the exterior stairs of the startup building to the second-floor lobby. Our company is right there at the outer end. Peering through the glass wall, I noticed the meeting room was packed. At the head of the table sat a sharply dressed guy, likely over 6 feet tall, drumming his long fingers on the table. His silhouette looked somewhat familiar, but I couldn't recall where I'd seen him. His face was hidden behind frosted glass, yet his presence stood out. This must be Group Y's big boss, I thought. I stole a glance at my reflection in the glass, fixing myself up a bit. Sorry, everyone, ran into some issues, and I'm a bit late. I said the last part almost mechanically, word by word as I realized who was behind the frosted glass. Isn't that Simon? My first instinct was to run. But then I remembered, this is my turf. Plus, it seemed like he didn't recognize me. He didn't show any sign of acknowledgement, just nodded slightly. I cursed him in my mind for not recognizing who he did that with, proving looks can be deceiving. But given Group Y's design fee, I swallowed my pride. Charles gave me a look, and I took a seat beside Simon on the right. I'd already prepped the research report, hooked up the projector, and started the presentation. After about 20 minutes, I wrapped up, and the room went silent. Did we blow it? My mind blanked out, with numbers instantly resetting to 0. I quietly placed a hand on my belly. Sorry, little one, it's my fault as your mom for not landing this gig and providing that fancy formula. When can you deliver? A cool voice finally broke the silence. So, does this mean we're good to go? Charles answered before me, 1 month. I glared at him. Was I some sort of workhorse to him? He's all about the cash flow, no morals there. How long do you think, Giselle? Simon ignored Charles and glanced at me nonchalantly. I intended to suggest 3 months, but under his intense gaze, I reluctantly said 2. Back in the day, 2 months wouldn't have been a problem. I used to work until dawn. But now, with the baby, it's complicated. 3 months. I want the final designs and files, Simon said. I raised an eyebrow, thinking maybe Simon isn't as tough as Charles had warned earlier. All right, looking forward to working with you, Simon. I habitually reached out my hand. It hung awkwardly as I didn't expect him to shake it. To my surprise, a firm yet cold hand clasped mine. Pleasure doing business, Giselle. His hand, as cool as his demeanor, chilled me from the palm outwards. Maybe he isn't as nice as I thought. Later, when I shared the encounter with Shirley, she summed it up with, unbelievable. He doesn't even remember who he slept with? A true jerk, she said disdainfully. I hesitated before revealing another piece of that night's puzzle. I actually had the wrong room key. It was Fiona's I picked up. Shirley's reaction was an epic facepalm. Giselle, any more surprises? Please, you've given me enough shocks for a day. I nodded, confirming that was all. After a while, she pieced it together. Maybe he thought he hooked up with Fiona? I nodded, thinking his reaction today made that plausible. 2 weeks later, at Group Y's building, I was extra careful. Charles was steadying my shoulder. I'd nearly tripped in my heels. Simon appeared from his office, casting a cold glance. $1 million for this? Giselle did a kid's doodle? Simon's look was 30% amused, 40% dismissive, and 100% irritating. For your kid. The room fell silent, everyone stunned at my retort. Even Charles's eyes seemed ready to pop out. I might edit, but not at an insult's cost. Expecting Simon to terminate the partnership, I braced myself. Unexpectedly, he asked almost casually, so, are you pregnant? I wanted to retort, but he nailed it. I was indeed pregnant. Seeing his amused expression made me even more annoyed. Sorry, Simon, we only work with decent folks. I stormed out without a second glance. It wasn't until I reached the street that I realized what I'd done. $1 million. Charles found me by a flower bed. Why cry? Forget this project if we must. Was I crying? I touched my damp face. It seemed unjust, carrying his child only to face mockery. Even if I chose to raise this child alone, grief still crept in. Assuming the project fell through, Charles was despondent all week. Then, on Wednesday, just before closing, his booming voice filled the office. Giselle, Group Y called, continuing the project, and they want to invite us to their production line tomorrow. Simon also apologized for his rudeness. I thought I'd misheard. Simon with that icy demeanor, apologizing? It's probably his people just trying to save face for us. I'm not feeling great. I'll call out tomorrow, you guys go ahead. Thinking about Simon's punchable face from that day, I really don't want to see him. Plus, I've been having terrible morning sickness, and the factory smells are overwhelming. Even though Simon has no clue, it's best to be cautious. Thursday morning. I stared at the black car and the flashy logo in front of me, inwardly cursing Charles 1,000 times. How did he give Simon my address? Simon, I've got my own car. Get in. Simon's tone left no room for refusal. I glanced at the driver sweating buckets beside me and reluctantly got in. The car was spacious, and I deliberately kept my distance from him. As soon as I got in, Simon closed his eyes, seemingly resting. Not feeling well? At some point, Simon had opened his eyes. Caught off guard, I froze with the bottle of meds in my hand, then quickly popped a pill into my mouth. They're actually folic acid tablets the doctor gave to prevent fetal malformations. He frowned at me. Don't you know how to take care of yourself? Why do you care? I shot him a glare. My condition is partly his fault. Giselle, you're going to be the death of me eventually. I heard Simon's voice, and he sounded a little bit of angry. Seemed like I really pushed his buttons. He used my name directly. I ignored him and closed my eyes, trying to rest. Lately, I've felt like I can never get enough sleep. I heard a sigh beside me and felt a blanket gently drape over me. Y Group's factory wasn't too far from the headquarters we went to last time. The production line stretched hundreds of meters. It was quite impressive. Your designs aren't bad, but they lack practical application. Simon's cool voice sounded overhead. I was about to speak when I felt a wave of nausea, rushing over to a nearby trash can. A large hand gently patted my back, and I heard Simon ask someone to bring water. I'll take you to the hospital. I barely caught my breath when Simon grabbed my wrist to drag me to the car. Remembering the baby, I couldn't go to the hospital with him, it'd give everything away. Really not going? Simon looked down at me, a slight frown on his face. I nodded like a pecking chicken. Giselle, you're such a worrywart. This was the second time today Simon used my name. Unlike earlier anger, his tone now was mainly helpless, even with a hint of affection. When that word popped into my head, I wondered if I was losing it. The car pulled up at my building around 3 p.m. I wanted to go back to the office, but after this morning's drama, Simon dropped me off home instead. As I reached for the door to leave, he caught my wrist lightly. I looked at Simon, puzzled. He quickly withdrew his hand, cleared his throat, and said, "Get some rest, no rush on the designs." I assured Simon, "I'll stick to the contract. And, thanks for the ride back." I gave him a polite smile and got out of the car. The visit had been incredibly beneficial. Simon was right about our oversight on actual production practicalities. The second draft was approved quickly. "Charles, Giselle, stay for dinner," Stephen said. By the time the proposal was done, it was 6 p.m. I walked behind Simon as Charles chatted with Stephen and others. Feeling better? A cool yet slightly concerned voice came from above. I looked up to meet Simon's calm eyes. I had to admit, Simon was exceptionally good-looking. His features were like they were chiseled out of marble. If the baby inherits his looks. Simon's light cough interrupted my daydreams. I nodded awkwardly. "I'm fine now." "Good to hear," he replied, sounding genuinely relieved. Suddenly, Simon didn't seem so annoying. It was dark by the time we finished eating. October in sunny town was getting chilly. I'd worn a lightweight knit dress. Feeling the chill, I hugged myself tightly. A warm jacket draped over my shoulders, carrying a familiar scent. Simon stood with his back to the street lamp, his shadow falling over me. As he adjusted the long suit jacket on my shoulders, he said, "Stop sacrificing your health for style." I wasn't sure if it was the warm streetlights or the gentle night breeze, but Simon seemed unusually gentle. "Giselle, something came up, and I can't take you home." "Simon, can you?" Charles's voice jolted me back to reality. I wanted to find a hole to crawl into. Charles dashed into his car and sped off before I could reply. Watching Charles's taillights disappear, I regretted my morning decision to ride with him. "Let's go." Simon opened the car door, his tone noticeably softer. His unexpected kindness threw me off. Avoiding his gaze, I got in. Pregnant women get sleepy easily. I fell asleep shortly after we started driving. I woke up with the car already parked outside my building. I was about to say goodbye to Simon and get out, but he called after me. "Giselle, don't you have anything to say to me?" Simon slightly shifted, resting his elbow on the steering wheel. His deep eyes were unreadable. I didn't know what he wanted, so I just shook my head. "No." The moment I answered, I heard him sigh softly. Was it my imagination, or did I see a hint of sadness in his eyes? Something was off with Simon today. Go up and rest, don't catch a cold. Simon's voice was pleasant, a classic deep tone. It made my heart skip a beat. I told him to be careful and hurried out of the car. It wasn't until I got home that I realized I'd left my purse in his car. But by the time I went back down, he was long gone. That night, I dreamt Simon took the baby and married Fiona. Giselle, your son just called me Mom. Fiona's smile looked somewhat twisted, and I woke up startled. I patted my still flat stomach, relieved it was just a dream. As I got off work on Friday and stepped out of the elevator in my apartment building, I saw Simon standing by my front door. I was caught off guard for a moment. He was tall and wearing a perfectly tailored dark suit, like he just came from some formal event. The motion sensor light dimmed, and in the somewhat dark hallway, his gaze gave me a bit of a chill. I noticed the women's bag in his hand. It was the one I left in his car yesterday. He looked angry, probably because I made him make an extra trip. Trouble you, Simon, I said with an awkward smile, reaching out to take the bag. Simon just shifted slightly and my hand hit air. I looked at him, puzzled, but he didn't move. Instead, he stared at me intensely like he was trying to see right through me. After what felt like forever, he finally spoke, his voice seemingly suppressing something. Giselle, I'll ask you one last time, are you hiding something from me? I had answered this question yesterday, but his direct, intense gaze made me feel uneasy. Remembering the dream from last night, I tried to change the subject. What could I be hiding from you? At most I charged a little extra for the design fee. Simon, if you think it's expensive, you can stop the collaboration. I could see his chest heaving. I had clearly irritated him. Giselle, you really haven't changed a bit, stubborn as ever. Simon let out a laugh that didn't quite reach his eyes, squeezing those words through clenched teeth, clearly angry. Then he pulled out a piece of paper from his tailored trousers. It was filled with data, my medical report. What is Simon on about now? I tried to keep calm, but really my mind was blank, with the dream from last night flashing in my head. Giselle, you're going to be the death of me, he said. He said that before. This kid, did it just pop out of nowhere? He still looked angry as he said this. My heart was pounding. It was funny to claim, even if I were pregnant, what does it have to do with you? I tried to snatch the report, but Simon was holding it too high. I lost my balance in my hurry and fell onto him. I heard him let out a small chuckle and he pulled me in tight. Has nothing to do with me? Can you get pregnant on your own? My mind went blank. I realized Simon was playing me. So he knew all along it was me that night. Could it be, if not for the child, he wouldn't even admit it? Is he worried that I would try and manipulate him with the child, or doesn't he want a Simon heir abandoned somewhere? Regardless of his reasons, I couldn't allow it. I didn't want my child to feel unwanted or brought into the world as some kind of leverage. I want him to grow up surrounded by love. Why not with someone else? I pushed away from him, meeting his eyes. You wouldn't dare. Simon practically growled the words, a warning clear in his tone. And why wouldn't I dare? I found it amusing. He could afford to have a one-night stand but suddenly wants to control me. Giselle, I think you won't accept the truth until you see it. Simon laughed, though it was anything but funny. And the laugh unnerved me. I couldn't go to the hospital with him. If we went, it would all come out that the child was his. Whether he wanted to take the child back to the Simon family or force me to get rid of it, I couldn't handle either. In these 2 months, I've come to accept and love this child, although it hasn't even formed yet, I know I love it. I cannot let anyone take it away from me. Afraid now? Simon sneered, folding the report. His expression slowly blended with an old memory, a young boy who also had that same smirk. The memory was like a dull knife grinding my heart, not too painful but certainly irritating. I took a deep breath, feigning nonchalance. Simon, don't be naive in thinking I'll keep your child. Simon paused, eyes narrowing, clearly not comprehending right away. First, you and I aren't close, let alone in love. Without this child, Simon wouldn't even acknowledge that night. I saw the anger flare in his eyes, dangerous. There's no turning back now, so I continued with the lie. Second, you know how that night happened. So tell me, dear Simon, why should I keep this child? I tried to seem unmoved, but Simon's face darkened. He was definitely furious, repeating, Giselle, you're truly heartless. I watched him storm off until the elevator doors fully closed, feeling deflated. I had to lean against the wall to keep from collapsing. If Simon stayed a second longer, my composure would have shattered. I thought for sure he'd hate me after that. But come Monday, his familiar car was parked downstairs. The window half down, I saw Simon's handsome but visibly tired face, not like his usual calm self. Get in. His voice was not as harsh or commanding as before, it had a sense of loneliness and vulnerability. My heart ached a bit as if on impulse. I got in the car. He handed me a neat bag filled with breakfast. Thanks. Simon didn't respond, focused on driving. At lunch, after preparing to go to the company canteen with colleagues, I saw Simon standing outside. It was lunchtime for most companies. Simon's striking looks were drawing attention from passers-by. He held two neat paper bags, one from the dessert place I frequented. He walked up, pulling me by the wrist through the crowd. Don't look, let's go eat, Charles shouted from behind, making my ears burn with embarrassment, forgetting to shake off Simon's hand. Don't eat things without nutrition anymore, miscarriage is no small thing, also watch out for yourself, Simon said as he opened the lunchboxes, offering advice. He seemed a bit better than in the morning, yet still tired. I had told that lie just to avoid further entanglement with him, never expecting he'd believe it. Nodding a bit woodenly, seeing him so attentive made me feel a twinge of guilt. But I reassured myself, this food isn't just for me, it's for the child too. For the next month, Simon drove me to and from work every single day without fail, and he also delivered 3 meals to the office. In the mornings, I'd look at myself in the mirror and notice the slight bump starting to form on my belly. I knew I couldn't keep this up. The thought of Simon finding out I'd deceived him brought back a chill as I remembered how angry he'd gotten that night. Around noon, after Simon cleared away my utensils and handed me a wet wipe to clean my hands, he asked, "What do you want to eat tonight?" He was looking down, his long lashes casting shadows over his dark eyes, and below his high-bridged nose were his slightly parted lips that I couldn't stop thinking about, making my face feel warm. I haven't decided yet, I responded, turning my head awkwardly away. The rehearsed words in my mind changed as they reached my lips. All right, message me when you decide. Go upstairs and rest, he said, gently ruffling my hair with an easy smile in his eyes. At first, I was hesitant about his gestures, but you can't bite the hand that feeds you. Now I'm just used to it. In the afternoon, Fiona called to meet at a cafe in the industrial park. When I got there, she was already waiting. She was wearing a white dress with heavy makeup and potent perfume. As I approached, I felt a wave of nausea. Giselle, let's not beat around the bush. I know you took the room key at the class reunion. She put her designer bag on the table, flaunting its logo. I didn't bother explaining since it was true. I raised an eyebrow, waiting for her to continue. Stop clinging to Simon. We're getting engaged soon, and I assume you're not keen on being a mistress. She showed off a shiny ring on her red-nailed finger, smirking at me. I was momentarily stunned, thinking back to Simon's earlier easy smile. It left a knot in my chest. I know he's been with you lately, she continued. Simon told me he's just feeling guilty about causing your miscarriage. Deep down, I always knew Simon's motives, but hearing it out loud felt different. Are you sure it's me clinging to him? If you're just here to talk nonsense, I really don't have time for this. Ignoring Fiona's shouting, I went straight back to the office. What's got you so worked up? Did Simon upset you today? Charles casually sprawled over my desk, his usual laid-back vibe. Leave Simon out of this, I shot back, rolling my eyes before diving back into the paperwork for the final proposal on Y Group's project. You two are so obvious, nobody would guess otherwise. How did you even get involved with Simon, anyway? Charles, always the instigator, was ignored as I went to fetch the printed designs. After work, I stalled for a bit and messaged Simon that he didn't need to pick me up. When he didn't reply, I assumed he'd gone home, only to step outside and see him leaning against the company corridor, looking at his phone. All done? He asked, pocketing his phone and reaching for my bag as usual. I switched hands, dodging his grasp. What's wrong? He questioned, brows furrowing as he picked up on my bad mood. I thought of Fiona's visit earlier and her engagement ring. Almost engaged and you're still parading in front of me. Now I'm branded as a mistress, I fumed, ignoring him as I stormed past with him trailing behind. By the time Simon tried to hold me again, I was ready to shake him off, but he pulled me into a tight embrace. What did I do wrong? Just tell me, he said, his familiar face genuinely concerned and bewildered. Suddenly, I felt foolish. I was the one deceiving him, enjoying the perks of his guilt. He owed me nothing, yet here I was, jealous. A jealousy, truthfully, that's been quietly brewing since high school. Simon, stop being so nice to me. You don't owe me anything, those things happened out of mutual consent. We're even now, I admitted, leaning weakly against his chest, trying to keep it together. I expected him to agree, but instead, I was met with deep sadness in his eyes. Do you really not want any connection with me? He asked. I wanted to say no, but my pride and baby wouldn't let me bear the stigma of being a mistress. Your fiancé came to see me earlier. I think we need to keep a distance. You've done enough about the kid, I told him. He looked stunned, clearly unprepared for the fiancé comment. As I tried to step away, he held me firmly, bewildered. Fiancé? What fiancé? Remembering Fiona's ring, I snapped. Fiona, with the ring on her finger, and you deny it? Typical. Somehow looking even more puzzled, he asked, Fiona who? Leaving me in shock. Was Fiona lying, or was Simon? I honestly have no clue who she is. Why did she come to you? Simon released me slightly, genuinely confused. It was now clear, Fiona was the one lying. Was this why you were mad all afternoon? Simon asked, giving my face a little tug. I nodded. How would I know she was bluffing? Giselle, I thought I'd made my feelings clear enough, he sighed, his voice tinged with exasperation. What do you mean? I asked, my heart racing, cautiously looking at him. Giselle, you're going to be the death of me, he murmured, shaking his head. You're always saying I'll be the death of you, but you're the one driving me crazy, I grumbled, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Simon sighed with a faint smile, his face a mix of fondness and frustration. Though the early winter breeze was chilly, his next words made my cheeks blaze. I didn't do all this out of guilt, Giselle. I did it because I like you, and I assumed it was obvious by now. My head felt like it was exploding, like fireworks were going off inside. Did Simon just say he liked me? Maybe it was just because he confessed that. Simon awkwardly turned his head away. So, do you want to be with me? He looked just like a kid asking for candy, hopeful but a bit proud. It made me want to mess with him. We don't know each other that well. I turned to him, my face serious. After all, he used to play jokes on me. How well do we need to know each other? Simon asked, a sly smile on his face, dragging out his words. By the time I realized what was happening, my face was bright red. Simon. I heard you, I'm not deaf. No need to shout so loud, save that energy for something else, his voice full of teasing. My face turned even redder. I stomped on his foot and quickly walked away, hearing his cheerful laughter behind me. I hadn't gone far before he caught up with me. You still haven't answered my question. I haven't figured it out yet. And I'm not being dramatic, I really don't know why Simon suddenly likes me, or if it's just guilt he's mistaken for love. I don't want to wait too long, Giselle. I've waited long enough. His eyes sparkled like stars, and I pressed my lips together, lightly nodding. Then, I saw a smile spread across his face. When Shirley heard Simon confess to me, she just said, have Simon invest in making it a TV series, thriller suspense kind of love story, it'll be a hit. Shirley, what should I do? I looked at her, pitifully. I didn't expect things to turn out like this. Didn't you have a crush on Simon in high school? Now's your chance. Dream comes true, right? Shirley lightly poked me on the forehead, clearly enjoying the drama. Yeah, I liked Simon since freshman year of high school. It was no secret back then, with so much gossip, no one remembered my story. The proposal went smoothly the next day, and then it was just wrapping things up. The company organized a party to celebrate the project's success. We decided to go sing karaoke after lunch. I had just parked in front of the restaurant when I noticed a familiar car pulling up. Wasn't it a company-only dinner? I glanced at Charles, wondering why he invited Simon. Simon's practically one of us. Charles greeted Simon as a few young women whispered and giggled behind him. Charles is great, except for his big mouth. Giselle, let me toast to you. The company relies on you so much, you've worked really hard. Charles raised his glass at the table, catching me off guard with his sudden sentimentality. I raised my juice glass for a toast. Are we still friends? Charles seemed disappointed with my juice. I'm not much of a drinker, only occasionally having a little. Just as I was thinking how to refuse without causing suspicion, a pair of long fingers clinked glasses with him. I'll drink with Charles. Simon, with a slight smirk, downed his wine calmly, leaving Charles with no complaints. The party wrapped up well into the night. I glanced at Simon resting in the passenger seat, inching closer quietly. His eyelashes were so long. He looked even cuter asleep than awake. Got your fill of staring? He spoke up, his voice playful. Who was staring at you? I hurried back to my seat, refusing to admit it without proof. Simon dropped the topic, but his eyes still held a lingering smile. Have you decided yet? What? I didn't catch on immediately. You know what I mean. Simon raised an eyebrow. If I pretend I've forgotten, I think he'd definitely lose it. I thought about it a lot last night. I know I like him. Or maybe I've always liked him. That night I recognized it was him, which is why I let things happen with my drunken courage. But I didn't know if he truly liked me, or why he suddenly did. Simon, why do you like me? Simon didn't expect me to ask. The smile on his face slowly faded as he tried to remember something. A moment passed before he spoke, maybe because you're clumsy but won't admit it. I exhaled deeply, fighting back tears. He had no idea how much courage it took for me to ask that. If he answered sincerely, I'd agree. I wasn't sure how genuine he was. Why are you crying? I was just teasing. Simon's voice showed surprise and concern, not expecting my reaction. I turned away, avoiding his outstretched hand. Simon, do you think it's fun to mess with me? Do you want the truth? Simon leaned closer, cupping my face, forcing me to look into his eyes. In his gaze, I saw seriousness mixed with undeniable warmth. Do you remember freshman year? I was surprised he brought up freshman year. I thought he'd forgotten and never imagined he'd remember me then. You always wore your hair in a high ponytail, loved white dresses, and your eyes curved like a crescent when you smiled, even if you aren't as sassy as you are now. Simon pinched my cheek as he spoke. Seriously? You liked me back then? I couldn't believe it. He always seemed so aloof at that time. Simon raised an eyebrow, not denying it. So why did you embarrass me when I confessed to you? I remembered that night after midterms, the class hosted a movie night. Encouraged by everyone, I confessed to Simon under the guise of a game. After gathering my courage to tell him, he just gave me a sideways glance and scoffed, walking out of the class amidst cheering. Did you even know which game you were playing? Simon frowned but continued, would you have come to find me if you hadn't lost at truth or dare? His words carried a slight pout. But I chose truth. I chuckled, feeling a bit emotional. Turns out he always thought I was teasing him. As soon as I finished, I was pulled into a warm hug, tight enough to make breathing difficult. He asked softly, you weren't lying to me, were you? No one's lying to you, I replied, my voice slightly thick with emotion. We'd liked each other all along, misunderstanding one another, causing years of avoidable distance. Simon later explained that when Fiona ended up in his car, it was under the pretense of something being from me. Once found out, they stopped talking. What if I hadn't mixed up the room keys at the last party? Thinking about the mix-up, if I hadn't grabbed the wrong room key, it'd be Fiona expecting his child. Impossible. Simon seemed completely unbothered by the idea. I don't get where his confidence comes from. Just as I'm puzzled, I hear him say, because it was my plan, and if I got really drunk, it wouldn't work. I see a hint of successful scheming in his eyes. Simon, I start, gritting my teeth a bit. He's quite the schemer. Later, I found out it wasn't just that night. Even the collaboration with Y Group was orchestrated by him. I was played all along. Don't be mad. My bad, it won't happen again. He rubs my head, apologizing with zero sincerity. But thinking about the baby in my belly, it didn't feel like I lost. Even he got played. Sure enough, when I told him about the baby, Simon's face was more expressive than ever. It took a while before he finally spoke, his voice actually trembling. Giselle, say that again. I meant to mess with him a bit, didn't expect such a big reaction. I got a little scared too, so I obediently said it again. I said our baby is still here. You're not lying, right? You wouldn't lie to me, right? His voice was filled with hidden excitement. I nodded. He hugged me again, even tighter this time. He said thank goodness several times, and then I felt something wet on my neck. Simon was crying. The always cold and sharp-tongued Simon was crying. Sorry, I didn't mean to keep it from you. I was afraid you wouldn't want to keep the baby. I realized I might have taken things way too far. I should be the one apologizing. I was such a jerk for making you think I didn't want the baby. I'm sorry, sweetie, it won't happen again. He brushed his cheek against my neck, and I reached out to gently wrap my arms around his waist. How does Fiona know so much about me? I remembered what Fiona said a few days ago, knowing my every move. Stephen likes her. Simon explained how things went down. Tom was the one who knew his whereabouts best, makes sense. Apparently, Fiona wanted to intimidate me, pushing me out to get closer to Simon. Well, clearly, her plan didn't work out. I was planning to drop him off at his place and head home. When I called Shirley to say I wasn't coming back, she just teased, take it easy. Go take a shower. We should go to the hospital early tomorrow. Simon's eyes were full of mischief. Didn't you suspect anything? I pointed at my slightly raised belly. How did Simon, so smart, not notice? I thought it was because I was spoiling you, making you gain weight. He reached out cautiously like he was touching a rare gem. Considering how he deliver my 3 meals a day right on time, I guess it's understandable. Throughout the checkup, Simon was overly cautious, too much for my liking. My daughter is in there. If I'd known, how could I have been so harsh on you? Simon carefully helped me down the stairs. So you can be harsh on me in regular times? I squinted my eyes, giving him a dissatisfied look. I wouldn't dare. As if there's anything Simon wouldn't dare to do. I scoffed at him. He once criticized my easy childlike sketches. Taking the results, we went back to the clinic. The female doctor adjusted her glasses out of habit, looked at the report, then at Simon next to me, frowning. I got a bit nervous, worried something was wrong with my report, thinking about what the doctor had said about potential issues. Simon held my hand gently, signaling me to relax. After a while, the doctor finally spoke. Is this the jerk? The grip on my hand tightened noticeably, sending chills down my spine. No need to look back to know that Simon's face was as dark as coal. There wasn't an issue with the exam. The doctor just told me to rest, eat well, and stay happy. Even though the sun was bright as we left the hospital, I felt a chill. Simon shut the car door, buckled my seatbelt, putting one hand casually on the steering wheel, showing no signs of starting the car. I could see a hint of danger in his handsome eyes. Giselle, you'd better explain. I shrunk my neck. I didn't expect the doctor to be so blunt. You just said you wouldn't be harsh, now you're going back on your word. Isn't that being a jerk? What to do when your boyfriend's mad? The best method, get him to take the blame first. Simon hesitated a bit, obviously not following my logic. You always being harsh could scare the baby in my belly, and the doctor said to keep me happy. I put on a pitiful face, sticking out my bottom lip. I have to say, it worked. Simon, who was just serious, lightened up right away. Sorry, it won't happen again. In the end, he seemed to remember something, gently touching my belly. Be good, baby. Daddy didn't mean it. Daddy loves mommy very much. Honestly, Simon seemed a bit silly right now. What if my daughter thinks I don't want her and isn't close to me later? Even if she's still in the belly, she can't be wronged. Simon skillfully drove, sounding cheerful. Your daughter is your priority. I'll just give you a son and make you mad. As long as you're happy. Waiting at the red light, Simon rubbed my head. He was clearly in a great mood. After we got back, we told both families about the news. My mom Amanda was furious. If she and Dad hadn't gone back to their hometown last week, she'd probably have rushed over to scold me. My dad was calm, though. Whose child is it? Simon turned the phone towards him, showing unprecedented politeness and humility. It took a while, then Amanda, who almost passed out from anger, asked, Weren't you in the same class as Giselle in high school? Not just Simon, even I didn't expect my mom to recognize him. If I knew what she was about to say, I would have hung up immediately. After a freshman exam, didn't you cry your eyes out? Later, while cleaning, I found your diary. You wrote about a guy named Simon. Luckily, Dad changed the subject in time, or Amanda would have read the whole diary. It's true that mothers-in-law like their sons-in-law the more they see them. As time passed, Amanda went from being mad at me to praising Simon. Thinking about it, maybe Simon really did charm everyone. Simon's parents were even more dramatic. An hour after the call, they were already at the doorstep. Giselle, isn't it? You're really pretty, the baby will be pretty too. Watching the overly excited Rose, I gave Simon a look. Mom, don't scare her, or my daughter. Simon chuckled, pulling me slightly closer. Daughters are great, not like Simon, always so cold. I agreed, nodding, then received a subtle warning look from Simon. Simon, if you're too harsh, you won't find a wife. Sending off Simon's parents, I leaned against the shoe cabinet, watching Simon as he closed the door. Didn't I find one already? Simon suddenly leaned closer. My hand was forced against the shoe cabinet, and he was so close. I could feel his breath lightly brushing my face as he spoke. Who is it? No chance to protest, a gentle kiss landed. This was the first time being so close with Simon while fully awake. My face flushed with heat. The kiss gradually grew bolder, and by the time it ended, I was leaning against Simon's chest, breathing heavily. I heard a soft chuckle above me. I pinched his waist hard, but thanks to his constant workout, I barely pinched more than a thin layer of skin. Simon's family suggested marriage to tie the knot before I started showing, but I turned it down. It wasn't that I didn't want to, there were just too many unknowns. Even though Simon and I had liked each other for a while, we hadn't been together long. It felt like everything was on fast forward. The unexpected arrival of a child, I wasn't ready for much. There were still lots of things we needed to work out, at least from my viewpoint. Simon wasn't upset about my refusal. All right, we'll do it your way. After that, Simon started dropping by my office even more often, bringing various food with him every day. Not busy today? Simon arrived 10 minutes earlier than usual. I took a sip of the soup he brought. It tasted pretty good. No matter how busy I am, I have to take care of my two precious ones. This is Christian carp soup Auntie just made, have some more. He ladled more into my bowl. Are we being a burden now? Don't even think that, it's my honor. Watching Simon running around busily, I shook my head. He was drifting further from his cool persona. To help take care of me, Simon moved all my stuff over. Meanwhile, Shirley sliced fruit and scolded me for leaving things unfinished. If you have time to cater to this little one, I might stick around too. I pointed to my belly, now bigger as weeks went by, making many tasks inconvenient. Got grievances? Take it up with Simon, nobody else will do. Shirley raised an eyebrow, glancing at Simon nearby, who was helping the maid tidy up. I nodded in agreement, not wanting to bear all this alone. Before, Simon didn't know how to use a washing machine, now he's skilled in housework and using all sorts of appliances. Recently, he's been learning some specialty dishes from Auntie, too. After my shower, when I came out of the bathroom, Simon was leaning against the headboard reading a parenting book. He wore a set of dark blue silk pajamas matching mine. I frowned slightly. Didn't we agree you'd sleep in the guest room? He had promised to respect my boundaries and was only here to take care of me. And it was just the second day. Simon put down his book, took the towel from my hands, and helped dry my hair. I'm just trying to be close for better care, you know? Simon, shouldn't you keep your promises? He just smiled without saying more, and then took out a hairdryer, gently drying my hair. Simon was determined to stay, and I couldn't resist, ultimately letting him in. Still, I wasn't worried he'd try anything. With the baby, he was careful even when just holding me to sleep. Having him around didn't affect me much, though his cold showers increased. I should have been prepared. He voiced his frustration after coming out of the bathroom. Realize that now? Too late. I teased, baring my teeth, having been set up by him originally. Don't get too smug. Long life ahead. Simon planted a firm kiss on me, intending to leave, but I mischievously pulled him back for another. His eyes, initially cooling, reignited intensely, deepening the kiss. As he gasped for air, holding me, I quipped, Simon, fancy another cold shower? Just as I finished speaking, his firm palm playfully swatted my behind, and his low voice followed, you'll live happily ever after, now sleep. I thought it was just tough talk until later, gazing at the slowly brightening sky, I muttered, Simon's really incorrigible. Around 6 months pregnant, my feet started swelling, my usual shoes didn't fit, and moving around became tough. Be careful at work, stay put during lunch, wait for me. Simon knelt down, carefully putting on my boots. He handled everything gently, as if worried about causing me discomfort. Even my mom admitted she couldn't be as meticulous as Simon. After helping me with my coat, ensuring I was wrapped up tight, we head out. Over the coming months, my leg swelling worsened, waking me with pain at night. Simon seemed to sense when I awoke, getting up every time to massage the swelling patiently. In the dim lamplight, Simon tended to the swelling with soft, meticulous hands. If something feels off, call me right away, don't endure it yourself, he gently said with his head slightly lowered. The lamplight on him exuded an inexplicable tenderness, and I realized I was too used to his pampering to ever leave him. Simon. I softly said his name. He looked up, his attractive eyes questioning. Let's get married. At this moment, I was sure, I wanted to be with him always. Simon paused in his actions, his confusion replaced with a smile. I heard him say, wait a sec, then he hopped off the bed, not bothering with shoes, and retrieved a navy blue velvet box. Miss Giselle, will you marry me? Wearing black pajamas, kneeling on one knee, the ring inside ready for God knows how long. His eyes couldn't hide the joy, his voice tinged with nerves. I didn't expect Simon to be nervous. I held my hand out coyly, mind slipping that on me, Mr. Simon? His hands shook a bit, taking longer than needed for such a simple act. Luckily my hand wasn't swollen, the ring fit perfectly. He exhaled softly once it was done. When did you get this? I admired the large diamond, loving it. Got it right after that night. I thought he bought it recently, not shortly after that high school reunion night. Simon, thank you. I hugged him, feeling my voice thickening with emotion. It's me who should thank you and our baby for being in my life. Simon gently patted my head, warmth in every word. Simon had efficiency on his side. The next morning, his voice woke me from slumber. Too tired to open my eyes, I let him dress and wipe my face. I heard mention of the marriage certificate as I drifted back to sleep. When I woke again, we were outside the marriage bureau. I recalled the proposal last night, but the speed caught me off guard. It wasn't until I had 2 red booklets in hand that it sunk in. You should have warned me sooner, I didn't even put on makeup. I glanced at my bare face on the marriage certificate photo, expressing some dissatisfaction. It would last a lifetime. You look amazing as always, he said, planting a strong kiss on my cheek. I wanted to counter his words, but caught in his slightly warning gaze and the red booklet, I realized, this time, I truly was his wife.